Mhm.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the next session. We have the luxury of Steve's time for an hour today, just to finish off some of the sharing work that we were doing. Thank you to everybody who's consistently turning up every week. It's amazing to see, and I hope you're getting a lot out of the course. Last week, we were looking at sharing in a lot of detail, and we were working through a live scenario, which Steve very kindly put together for us. And I believe we just have a little bit of that to finish off before we move on to the next topic. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Steve to lead us through that final part of the project. Thanks very much, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome, Gemma. And again, great to be here. Let me share my screen. Let's see. Can you guys see my screen?
Not just yet.
Okay. Window. Come on. So I'm just having a little problems with Google Hangouts. I am trying to allow it to share my screen, but
You just hit present now at the bottom.
yeah, I'm trying, and the little dialog window pops up, but it's not allowing me.
I did such a good intro as well.
Okay, wait a minute. I think I have it now.
I'm just kidding.
Okay. How about this? Doing better here?
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
Hang on. Anyone else see it? I saw it was about to share.
Oh, goodness. This just seems silly. Yeah, people can see it. Okay. And hopefully I am sure, because I have multiple monitors, I want to make sure. Can you see my screen that says sharing settings?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is where I kind of wanted to start today. And also, as I wanted to apologize, because as I was reading my requirements, I realized there were several ambiguities, things that were not clear. And so I wanted to kind of clear some of that up. So let me just start, though, by looking, kind of reviewing. We have two objects here, candidate and position. And I am in my organization-wide defaults, which, remember, this is kind of sets the very base level access for how records can be shared in Salesforce. So it all kind of starts here. And since we don't want everyone to be able to view either the candidate or the position objects or records, I have made them private. Okay. And being private means that if I create a position, only I can view it. No one else can see it. Okay. So we are going to have to open up access. And let's go back. Let's go back to the requirements a little bit further. Okay, so I have kind of rephrased the requirements and made them a little more Salesforce friendly here. So let's start with it. Positions created by the VP of Human Resources can be read or edited by the recruiting manager. And the thinking is that both the VP of Human Resources and the recruiting manager, the recruiting manager, if you remember the role, works directly under the VP of Human Resources. So they are both in the Human Resources department and should be able to read each other's records. So, and likewise, positions created by the recruiting manager can be read and edited by the VP of Human Resources. Okay, so hope that all makes sense. So these two people, they ought to, whoever creates the record, the other one ought to be able to read it and so on. So how are we going to accomplish that? Well, currently, and remember, so if the VP of Human Resources creates a position without any additional sharing, the recruiting manager could not see the position record. So what we need are some sharing rules. Okay, and so let's jump into Salesforce. So I'm going to show you how I set up the position object. So records created, position records can be shared by both. So I have position as private. Okay, and now we need to scroll down here and right down to sharing rules. You can see I have two rules. Let's look at the first one. So this rule says that users, let me edit here, make it a little more sense. So users in this role, excuse me, that is not what I wanted to share. These are roles. I'm going to go back. Sorry about that. And it's a little confusing thing because things are not alphabetized. Okay, here are the two sharing rules again. So the first rule says that if the owner is the recruiting manager, they are going to be sharing with the VP of Human Resources. So if the recruiting manager creates a position record, it is going to be the VP of Human Resources has read-write access to it. Likewise, if the VP of Human Resources creates a position record, the recruiting manager has read-write access. And if we look at this, sorry to keep jumping around here. And maybe the easiest thing is to go ahead and create a new one. Well, so when you're creating a sharing rule, you give it a name, description, and you only have a couple of options here. So you can, first of all, you specify who is going to be owning the record. And your options are public groups and roles. Okay, so I chose roles, and it was the VP of Human Resources role. And then you select who it's going to be shared with. So again, I selected role, and that was going to be the HR manager role. So using these two, with these two sharing rules, let's take a look at what we've got.
Steve, would you mind zooming in just a little bit, please?
Zooming in, okay. How about I can make it a little bit bigger?
I think Chimson's going to disappear into the computer screen in a minute, like it's Narnia.
Is this better?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Sorry about that. So I have created several positions here, and since we're dealing with a fireworks company, I have different Pyro, Dev 1, Dev 2, and Pyro Engineer. Now I've kind of forgotten who's created these. Okay, so let's, here's the first record. The owner is the HR, the VP of Human Resources. And you can see I went ahead and filled that in. I filled in the recruiting manager as who is in this position, but I didn't fill in the hiring manager yet. This next position, pyro engineer. This is one that I created. That's not going to be really useful to us. And here's a record that the recruiting manager created, and they filled in themselves, but again, the hiring manager is left blank. Okay, so if we test this out, remember we have to kind of jump through a few hoops here because of our limitation number of users. So bear with me. So let's log in as, let's log in. I'm going to turn off the manager.
Sorry, Steve. The screen's really small again. Would you mind popping it back in for me?
I didn't.
That's better.
That better? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are going to log in as the VP of Human Resources. Right here. So I need to make that active. And let's see, let's log in as this user and see what they can see. Go to positions. And all. I can see 2 records. And remember, I had more than this, more than these available. But that one record that that I created as the system administrator, it's not listed here. And because I don't have a sharing rule, sharing that one out. But this one, these are 2 different links. Let's see. Okay, so this is the one. I am HR VP Smith, and I created this record, so I would fully expect to be able to see this record. And this record was created by the recruiting manager. And so this is the one that without the sharing rule, I wouldn't be able to see. So I'm going to, sorry about that. So I am just going to see if there's any questions. I'm checking the comments. Any questions about how these sharing rules, why we needed 2 of them? Does this all make sense so far? Okay, very good. Think so.
Okay.
And now we, so you may have noticed we didn't have any sharing rules for candidates. So we are sharing positions kind of as we would expect, but let's set up the same sharing rules for candidates. And I can go ahead and create these, or we could ask for a volunteer. What do you think, Gemma? Should we have someone volunteer to do this portion?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Is anyone up for it? Maybe someone who hasn't been before? Silent.
Nah, okay. No one's brave enough to get into this?
Nope.
Okay, okay. I will forge on then.
Kat says she didn't do her homework. It's all right. Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Let's go ahead then. So, okay. So is it, what's the, let me just catch up. Which requirement are we doing?
So, yeah, let's formulate a requirement here.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was our requirement around the positions object.
So positions created by the VP of HR can be read or edited by the recruiting manager. So if we break that down, sorry, can you come back?
Yes.
So if we break that down, okay, VP HR is above the recruiting manager in the hierarchy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So positions created by VP HR, that obviously means that they own the record straight away, right?
Right.
So that means you need a sharing rule to say that anything that they create should be editable by the recruiting manager, who is below them in the hierarchy, and they wouldn't normally be able to see it because of the position that they are in the role hierarchy.
Exactly.
Okay. And then by default, breaking this down in reverse, if the recruiting manager owns a position, because they're beneath the VP of HR in the role hierarchy, there's no need to create any sharing rules for those because they can see them implicitly.
Now, so I may have needlessly created a sharing rule because I created a sharing rule so that the records created by the HR manager could be viewed by the VP. So perhaps I didn't need to do that.
And let's check the position in the role hierarchy. So sharing up happens by itself, but sharing downwards or sharing across as a sibling, you need to open up with rules.
And you can see my role hierarchy looks okay here. Yes, recruiting manager is below this. So you know what I'd like to do is turn off that sharing rule and create a record as the recruiting manager, and then make sure that the VP can see that record.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So.
And then in reverse, we can create a record that's owned by the VP of HR and show that the person below them can't see it before we open the sharing rule.
So I need to, so you see, I
think I want to just draw this out actually in lucid charts just to.
Okay.
While you're
doing that.
It's habit. People talk, I draw. Just helps me to make sense.
So this is the rule that I really having a problem here. And I'm wondering if I'm not, which user am I?
Looks like your system admin.
Okay, I should be. So I should be able to delete these sharing rules.
Yeah, so you're sharing upwards there between the recruiting manager and the VP of HR. So that's the extra rule that you don't need because by default the system already does.
Right.
So and the reason, people, let me explain why that should be deleted as opposed to just left, because if you just leave it where it is, it's okay if you've got small volumes of data, but if you start going into the millions of records, let's say over time, or if your organization is huge and aggressively hires, etc., and you have a private sharing model for that, that sharing rule is calculated. That sharing rule by default is calculated whenever someone saves the record. So, and which is okay if it's a small volume of records because there's no performance impact. But if you go into the millions, tens of millions, then that can really slow your system down because the change to the record means that it has to look at the position in the role hierarchy, so who should see it, so it does a calculation there, and then it looks for any sharing rules and does a calculation there. So we kind of say for preemptive, right now in this org, it wouldn't make a jot of difference, but just for good practice, it's best to avoid having needless config in there.
Yep. And that is a mistake that I made kind of early in my Salesforce career. I didn't account for how things may scale and performance impacts down the road. I just didn't know. you know. So
Yeah.
it's just there. These are things you may learn, you know, the hard way. But what I'm a little confused by is why I can't delete either of these sharing rules.
Oh.
And I have a feeling I may have to re-log in here. I have, I think my session settings are kind of messed up. So bear with me. I am going to relaunch this and see if it fixes the problem. Okay, go back into setup. Sharing settings. Okay, yeah, I would expect to edit and delete links on G's. These just
What
seen
about if
here.
you fix the rule itself?
Okay, see here. Yeah, now they're back. So,
Yeah, you're back. You're good.
yeah, so I think there was some, because I've been logging in and out as different users, I think my browser was a little confused about who I was. So this is the rule we decided to delete, that the recruiting manager is sharing with the VP. Shouldn't have to do that. And I'm just checking to make sure, okay.
Yep. So what you're doing there is you're sharing downwards. So anyone that's the best way to remember is if you need to share downwards, then you need a sharing rule. If you need to share to a sibling, you need to have a sharing rule. And also if you need to share to a role that's in another section of the role hierarchy, you need a sharing rule.
Okay. So now to test this, we ought to log in as the recruiting manager and see if the recruiting manager can see this record that was created by the VP of Human Resources. Okay, so I need to remove this active user because I want to be able to log in as the recruiting manager. Saving that. Here is the recruiting manager. Going to make them active. And I'm going to log in as the recruiting manager. And let's see what is available to me. I'm going to go to positions. Okay, I see 2 records. Just check all. Still see records. This first record. Okay. Yes, this is the record that without the sharing rule, I wouldn't be able to see because it was created by the VP of Human Resources, which is above me in the role hierarchy.
Perfect.
So here's the work. Okay. Now I'm going to log out. Okay, and now we need to do the same thing with candidates. And if we go back to our requirement again, it's really the same requirement. Candidates created by the VP of Human Resources can be read and edited by the recruiting manager. And we know that our organization-wide defaults for candidates is private. We have checked that previously. Let's find candidates here. Create a new sharing rule. So I'm going to say recruiting manager. I'm going to be a little more verbose in my description. Allow the
when I look at the roles, I see all we've created. However, when I try to assign one of those roles to a specific user, I only see the Salesforce defaults. So we're just checking if Jeremy's assigning to an active user with the Salesforce license. He's using one. Oh, okay. Yeah. So he only sees the Salesforce standard profiles, not roles. Okay, no problem. I'm just in the process of creating a diagram that will kind of explain this as well.
Okay, very good. All right, select the rule type. It is going to be based on the owner. We are going to be using rules. So we are talking here about who owns the record, and it is owned by the VP of Human Resources. And we are going to be sharing with the role of recruiting manager. Okay, so we are sharing downward in our hierarchy. We're going to select the access type. It is read write. I'm going to save. And you can see here it's going to recalculate. So in a large org, this can take hours and hours to recalculate sharing rules, right, Gemma?
Yep, for sure. You get an email to say that it's been done.
Yep. So in a real life situation in an org with several hundred users, you would probably want to do this to run overnight. Because while it's in process, I mean, I guess things could be a little indeterminate. Some records may be shared, others may not, as it's going through all these calculations. Okay, so now we want to test our new scenario. So that means we need to log in as the VP of Human Resources. To do that, I first need to deactivate the manager. Turn them off, saving that, logging in, VP active, saving that. Okay, and now I can log in. I'm going to create a candidate. Candidate name, Jim Smith, not very creative. And position, okay, so this is good. We can see the positions available. This is going to be, for PyroDev1. The status, we are going to be reviewing this. I'm just putting in a dummy social security number. So you can, again, the red stars, that means these are required fields. Phone number, that would probably be helpful. Let's save this. And the nice thing is, well, okay. So here's our candidate. Where? So now the question is, can the recruiting manager see this candidate? Again, we need to go log out as the VP and log in as the recruiting manager.
Yep, so as a recruiting manager, we should see a record that is owned by the VP of Human Resources.
Mm-hmm. And you see, I couldn't edit that because I'm still logged in as the HR user, not as, so I need to be logged in as myself to be able to edit these users. Okay, let's try that again. And I have a feeling that just, I am seeing the same issue I had before. It is confused about who I am. So, you know, I think I turned off the session settings, Gemma, that, you know, that allowed us to log out and not, you know, terminate our session, but it causes some confusion in the browser. And maybe this is just specific to this type of browser I'm using.
What are you using?
I am using Firefox.
Yeah, it's known to behave oddly with Firefox.
Oh, okay. Yep, I should have known that. I've encountered other issues when using Firefox.
Fireworks.
Yeah, Chrome is definitely the browser of choice in Salesforce.
For sure. And Safari is even dodgier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, never tried that. All right. All right, finally, I can deactivate this user. I can activate our recruiting manager. Fair amount of work just to prove this works.
Yeah.
So it's just really because of this silly requirement of 2 active users. Okay, so now I'm going to log in as a recruiting manager, look for candidates, and see what we see. I'm not seeing any. Oh, should I panic? No, because I need to go to all. Ah, there's Jim Smith. Okay.
Smashed it.
Terrific. And I can actually edit this record and make some changes if I wanted to. Okay. So I think we have proved that our sharing is indeed working as expected.
Fantastic.
Did you want to share something, Gemma, before I moved on to our next topic?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions?
Let's see. I've updated my permission set for hired manager. Yeah, I haven't really talked about permission sets here. We haven't used permission sets to do anything that we, you know, just sharing records yet. But I did want to discuss those next.
Okay.
Okay, so let me move on. We had a requirement. Our next requirement is perhaps the trickiest of the requirements. So we go back to this table. Can you guys see my table okay? Whoops, I didn't want to.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to go and check on my daughter, so please excuse me. Just
okay.
Make sure that
Sure.
she's ready for bed.
So perhaps the trickiest here is that the manager is only allowed to edit records when they are assigned as the hiring manager. Okay, so they are selectively being allowed to edit certain records. So they can read and create any records, but if you're a manager, you should only be able to edit the records, the position and the position record. That's what one we're talking about, where you are assigned. So if you remember our different options for sharing, and I created this little table here of our different options for sharing. So first off, could we just use the sharing rule for this? But if you remember the sharing rule, it is only looking at public groups and roles. And we really want to share based on how a field is set on the record. Right? So a sharing rule isn't going to help us out here. What about manual sharing? We talked about this a little bit last time. So that would certainly satisfy the requirement, but unfortunately, manual sharing is not available in Lightning. So your option is to revert to Classic, create a sharing role. So if I am the VP, I want to share, I created a position record and I wanted a certain manager to be able to edit this record, but not other managers. After I made the assignment of putting that manager on the record, I could create a manual sharing rule that would share this specific record with that specific manager if we were in Classic. But if we're not in Classic, we would have to revert. The other question is, if, depending on how many positions are created a week, is this a solution that is scalable? Okay, and that is always something you need to be thinking about. So if like 1 or 2 positions are created a week, it would not be difficult to manually share out those records. Maybe even if there's 10, 12 positions a week, still doable. But what if you're a really large company? I mean, imagine like Amazon, where they're creating maybe hundreds of new positions a week. Is it practical to create manual sharing rules for these? And it's really not. So this is the solution that doesn't really scale. Now, for maybe a small company, maybe a small startup, it would be fine for them because they don't mind doing a little extra manual work. Okay, so that's one method we have. The other method, there is an app exchange package that allows you to kind of get the manual sharing button back on records. So you would have to install that. There's always some risk with app exchange packages. Some testing would have to be done, so you would want to install it in the sandbox, test it. So that's a possible option. Sharing rule, that's not going to work. How about a permission set? Well, it could partially solve this, but a permission set would only give it only gives object level permissions to groups. Or, well, I should back up. I could create a permission set that would allow edit access on position records. But if I gave that permission set to a certain manager, it would allow them to edit all position records, not just the one. So if you trusted your managers, maybe some companies would be fine with this type of solution. The final way to go about this is that whenever you have blockages or seemingly that the platform doesn't have a capability that you need, there is always the option to create some custom code. So you could, if you had a developer or had a developer friend, they could write some custom Apex that as soon as that hiring manager was put on a position record, the Apex code in the back end, it would be a trigger, could go ahead and create a sharing kind of object that would allow, in essence, it would be creating a manual sharing rule, but it would all be done automatically in the back end. And the beauty of this is that it's scalable. These rules would it would all be done with automation in the back end. But the downside is that you need a developer to do this. So when you're faced with limitations, maybe that a client has a requirement that is not met without an out-of-the-box solution in Salesforce. You can always review the options. Maybe we can modify the requirement, like okay, using a permission set. That would be one way to go about it, or using manual sharing, having someone flip back and forth to Classic and to Lightning. So there are workarounds, and maybe some companies would be fine with that. But there was always the kind of the custom solution as well. Okay. Any questions on that? So I always thought it's important to lay out all the different possibilities, because sometimes clients may want something that is just not out of the box functionality for Salesforce, and it takes some custom development, or it takes some kind of modification of the requirements to make this work. Okay, so where should we go next? Are you back, Gemma?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yep. So Gemma, did you want to, so I kind of outlined the different options. It is really this one requirement about having managers only have edit access on position records where they are specified in the lookup field as the manager.
Mm-hmm.
That's really not standard Salesforce functionality, at least as far as Lightning goes. And, so I was just kind of laying out the different options available here. Anything you would like to add?
I think so. You've got manual sharing, app exchange package, sharing role, permission set, custom apex. Yeah. So no, I think you've covered those in good detail. Maybe we can just do a quick summary of what sharing is at a glance, maybe.
Okay.
So what I might do is, and thank you for taking us through that. What I might do is, if I can present, let me show you what I've been drawing while you've been taking us through that.
Sure.
A little bit of a multitasker here, but I hope it's useful. So let me know when you can see it.
Yep, we can see it.
Can you see a nasty looking diagram? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So this is the scenario that you have laid out, Steve. So with the exception of maybe the objects, which I can quickly change. Position. We have position. We have candidate. So what I want to do here is just summarize what Steve's very kindly drawn out for us in the scenario, and maybe an at a glance way for you to remember how it all works. So I've drawn the role hierarchy out here with the CEO, the VP of HR, the recruiting manager, and then I've drawn out the VP of development, the development manager, and the engineer. And at a glance, you can roughly see what the rules are. So the color codes are, if it's shown in green, it means that, the records are visible by default, so no changes are needed. Obviously, CEO, it would be a one almighty mess if I had everything rolling up to the CEO. Believe me, I tried. Decided to put them at the top there and say they could see everything. But hopefully this helps to give some clarity here. So just remembering that whenever you have a private sharing model or a public read-only sharing model, okay, so your OWDs are public read-only, public read-write. Molly, I hope you're getting your teeth cleaned, young lady. And private. Same with her toys. So what happens with this is, remember, every record has an owner. So there's two things to consider. One is where the owner's position is in the role hierarchy, and second of all, what's the type of relationship between the objects. And we know that candidates have a lookup to position. So there's no parent-child relationship there. So what that means is when, let's say, the VP of development owns a position record, then the CEO will be able to see it. And depending on what your general model is, if it's public read only, if you then wanted to make someone beneath you in the role hierarchy change that record, you'd either have to add them through manual sharing, add them through a team if it's a case, an opportunity, or an account, or add a sharing rule. Is that clear to everyone? Then, okay, cool. Then you've got, and then you've got, what I've done in the middle here is try to explain the situations where you would need a sharing rule. So you would need a sharing rule if you need to share data between these two, or indeed if you need to share the CEO's records as well. With any of the subordinates. Okay, so what you often see is if there's one team that shouldn't be able to see some certain data, then it means that by default you'll need to make sure that everything's set to private for that record. But then what you might typically do is create a sharing rule, which is records owned by role and subordinate CEO share with a public group that contains all the roles that should have access to it, with the exception of that team that shouldn't have access to it, and that should fit your requirement. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you can have this diagram. I'll put it on the site for you. Print it out and stick it on your table if you want to. The other side of it is around the relationships. So remember that if you've got objects related via lookup, then you will probably need to open up sharing rules, not just for the position, but for the candidate as well. Whereas if let's just say you did this slightly differently, and you had a slightly different model, and actually I've seen this done before in a HR recruiting app, is you might have an application that sits in between the candidate and the position record. So one, so one application could have multiple candidates as a child of the application, and then the position, oopsie, other way. See what I mean? We call this a junction object because it's in between two main ones. But if we were to say, no, that goes the other way. So if we were to say that there were these relationships were parent and child, which we know as we call in Salesforce is master detail. Good. So let's say candidate was a child of application and application was a child of position, then actually for your sharing, you would only open up you would only be able to open up sharing for the position record, because it would be inherit, the sharing settings themselves would be inherited, but down to the application and down to the candidate. Does that make sense? Steve, have I given that justice?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, and a diagram is very helpful here. Okay.
I will share this with you. You can have it. It's not exactly intellectual property, so anyone can have it. I will export it as an image and as a document.
And we could continue to build out, like we didn't really create sharing rules for the engineer to manager, but it's much the same as between position and candidate. And I thought, if we could, we got that part to work, we would see how the rest of it would work.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So does anybody have any questions for Steve before he has to drop in a moment? Well, good. Does that mean you're going to bed?
You're very welcome all. Yeah, and don't be frustrated if this doesn't make it's it takes a while for some of these concepts to sink in. And you have to, I always found I have to kind of struggle with things a little bit before they like really sink in and make some mistakes. But, I feel free to create your own scenarios, figure out why things are sharing as you think they should or why they're not. And good luck all.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to
Okay.
set more a project, which includes a bit of sharing later on. Steve, thank you very much for donating your time to support everybody. It is a big topic. Some of the most experienced people I know still struggle with these concepts. So please don't beat yourselves up if you don't get it straight away. The best thing to do is to keep practicing.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Bye all.
Bye, Steve. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Oh, he's gone just like that. Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you very much for persevering with us on that one. Like I say, it is a very big topic. So if you have any questions outside of this, just let me know. Now, what I'm going to do is download that and put it on the site for you. But today's training as well, I wanted to take us through to something a little bit simpler. Because I'm going to start working on formulas and validation rules with you in the next for this week, which is, if you think back to the days of your teenage years, when we were all learning algebra, and I don't know how many people came home from school and said, "Oh my God, why do I have to learn this? I'm never going to use it." Feel free to eat your words, because formulas and validations is quite a lot, very similar to algebra. In the sense that you're dealing with variables as opposed to static numbers. But we're not gonna try and fry your brains too much. We're just going to do some simple formulae, because I want to get you used to that. Where the content itself is going to get a little bit more interesting. When I say a bit more interesting, it's going to get a little bit more advanced over the next few weeks. My plan is to, for this week, we can make a start on formulas and validations, and we'll make some of those. We'll finish those off next week, and then look at Service Cloud and see how we get on through there. Because then I would like to actually start you on the cool stuff, which is the process automation, where if you update records, you can make things fly around the system by themselves, automatically, which is very cool. Is everybody okay with the pace of this course at the moment? I would really welcome some feedback from you. If you feel like we're maybe going too fast, going too slow, if you think I need to maybe give you guys something a little less advanced as a little break after this one, or if you're okay to carry on, I'm okay. So the complicated stuff like security was pretty fast. Okay, that's fine. Perhaps if you want to reach out to me afterwards, tell me if you think we could cover it again, or cover it with some more scenarios, then I'm happy to do that. You'll need a challenge. Okay. Right. Okay then. So let's take a look at Trailhead again. We're going to go back to our lovely friend Trailhead, and we're going to spend. Okay. Chimsum says he wanted to ask, what level are we like at now? Admin beginning. Yes. So actually, you'll start. This is all definitely admin stuff. And this is the kind of stuff that you could, if you're working as a Salesforce administrator, you would be dealing with quite regularly, especially from the sharing side. You probably spend more time troubleshooting it. So if you have an understanding of it and how it works and the principles, then you're going to be in a better position to troubleshoot it. And I will always, be there to support you afterwards as well if you need that help. So want to hear more about automation. Yeah, automation starts in a couple of weeks' time. Okay, everybody. So we're going to go back to Trailhead, and we are going to go and find a module called Formulas and Validations, and we're going to have some fun with these. So formulas and validations. I hope you're all logged into Trailhead. Apologies in advance if my little girl comes in to say hi. She likes to make her presence known. You can all see my screen, right? Lovely, thank you. Okay, so I'm just opening up my my hands-on org in advance, because again, I think I've done this one before. So open up formulas and validations. And we're going to have some fun with formula fields, roll-up summary fields, and validation rules. So I'll spend some time just explaining these. So we've looked at formula fields in a very basic way before now, where we took some, thank you, where we took some information, some data that's held in fields, and we added those two fields together in a formula field to do that. So I'm going to take you through this in a bit more detail, because I gave you a very quick, like, last 10 minutes of the course instruction around formula fields. So now I'm going to spend a little bit more time. So obviously in your organization, you've got a lot of tables and a lot of data being held within those tables or objects. So your opportunities, your accounts, your contacts are all related to one another. What that means is your users sometimes have to flit around the system a little bit. And they do that through their tabs. They do that through the relationship fields that are on records, where you click the blue link and it takes you through to another one, another screen. You've also got the hovers that pop up as well. If you hover over the account name, you'll get a very brief, compact layout showing up with all of the information on that you've summarized. Formula fields is just another way to give users information very quickly at a glance without them having to go elsewhere, but also to give them key information that needs to be calculated without them much having to get their calculators out or to work these things out themselves. Formula fields are a really powerful way to control how your data is displayed. So if you look at this example, this is an example of how many days are left until an opportunity's close date. So you can obviously create a simple formula field that will automatically calculate that value. And I think we may have done this already very quickly, very briefly, but we'll just, I think it's still worthwhile. By adding a formula field, you can actually have the system automatically count that value to look at how many days are left between now and the close date. And that would tell you, if there are any minus figures, that would tell you that you know, the opportunity needs to be updated with the right close date. So you could use something like a validation rule to say, if the days to close is less than 0, you could actually have a go at the you could actually force a sales user to update their close date, for example. And present an error message that says, sorry, you can't change anything on this record until you've updated the close date and said why you've moved it out, for example. And you could use that days to close field to do that. Once you add that field to your opportunity page layout, your users can see it, but also you can add it to reports and to list views. So you could actually create a list view that says, show me all opportunities where days to close is less than 0. And that will give you a naughty list where you could, so that you can target those salespeople as a manager and say, come on, get on top of your opportunity, get on top of your pipeline, guys. So when you're first learning them, start with simple calculations. But you can actually, but one of the things that I also think is important is actually start with good habits. Start by making your formula readable, so that those who come after you can figure out what's going on. Another great tip I can give you is comments. You can add comments to formula fields, and I have done this many, many, many times, especially when I've had to create some very, very complicated fields with nested if statements and things like that. I have added comments in there just to leave a good trail behind. So that's like another mantra of mine. Please leave a good paper trail behind for people to understand what's going on. Use Salesforce to document Salesforce. So let's have a look at the formula editor and get to know its features. So we're going to go to Trailhead now. So if you could all join me, we are going to go to our object manager, which is Backstage. So coming back into Salesforce, let me zoom in a little bit so that you can see. Okay, we're going to go Backstage. So we're going to click on our little cog at the top and we're going to click Setup. And I'm going to move my tab around so I don't end up clicking on the wrong things. Okay, then we're going to go to the opportunity object. So object manager. And quick find, hit opportunity. And we're going to go to fields and relationships. And I'll soon find out if I've done this before. No, I haven't done it before. Now, obviously, you've got a list of all your fields and the custom fields that have already been created. We are going to create a new formula field, which is called days to close. So we're going to go new. And I'm just going to talk to you about the types of why this field is slightly different to the other custom fields that you will create in Salesforce, because these are your typical data types. You'll have an auto number, a formula, roll-up summary. Roll-up summaries we'll look at shortly. You have your relationships, you have your checkboxes, currency fields, dates. One is just a simple date, the other is date and time. You have an email field, you can have a geolocation field, so that can be used for maps, for latitude and longitude, and that can feed into a map if you're putting that in your system. Numbers, percents, phone numbers, pick lists, multi-pick lists, text area long, and then your rich text, and then you've got an encrypted version as well. Then you've got your time and your links. So if you want to put a link, if you want to allow people to input a link, I have one on my opportunities where I say, can you please provide the link to the partner portal version of my opportunity? Then you can enter that into a URL field. So what I do then is, and obviously the experience that you have when you create these fields is different depending on the type of field that you have. If you create a lookup relationship, then you'll be asked to explain which object you're going to link it to, and then you'll get the standard, what's the help text, what's the description, are there any filters that you want to apply, do you want to make this field required, etc., etc. And formula fields are probably the most, actually formula and roll-up summary fields are probably the most, you've got the most steps to follow, where you've got to have your wits about you, if you like. So I'm going to click a formula field. What I will then see is what's the type of data that this formula field is going to return. So if I put in a calculation, is it going to show text, a number, percentage? Is it going to show a checkbox? Is it going to show a calculated time? So you can have a start time and end time depending on how many days somebody works, for example, if you were going to use Salesforce for scheduling. Currencies, dates, numbers, etc. So this is not the type of data. This is for the field. This is a formula's type of data to return once the calculation has been done. What it does mean is that in some cases there are certain operators that you have to use. Especially if you are translating, if you're taking an input field, which is a pick list, for example, you will have to convert that pick list value into text in your formula field before you can do anything with it. I know it sounds complicated. This is the kind of stuff that you learn kind of as you go. But let's take this example of days to close. So we are going to create a formula called, what's it doing here? This is the one we did earlier, isn't it? Days to, no, I'm going to skip. No, I'm not. Sorry, just thinking on my feet. So for this formula field, we are going to create a field called, we're going to return some data called days to close. So let's have a quick recap on what the formula editor looks like. So I'm going to pick number as my formula field, and I'm going to take away the decimal places. Remember, when you create a number field, you have to do 16 digits and then 2 decimal places. For the formula field, you can add 0 decimal places, but just bear in mind that it rounds. If you're returning a number, it will round it up or down according to where it is. So in my field label, I'm going to say days to close. And then I'm going to hit next. And then I'm given the formula editor. Now, simple formula, I've hardly ever used. Advanced formula is the easiest way to do it because you get to see more functionality. You can do more with it. So what are the two? So obviously, if I'm doing a calculation, I need some input data. Where am I going to get my input data? Well, I need to know when the opportunity is due to close, and I need to know today's date. So I'm going to go and get my opportunity close date first, and I'm going to hit insert field, and I'm given the I'm given a list of all the objects that I can actually go and get data from. In this instance, because I'm already on the opportunity object, I can see all the opportunity fields displayed on the right hand side here, and any that have a greater than, so labels followed by a greater than sign, show that there are more fields available. That's a very succinct way of saying this is where you can pull fields down through relationships. And in order to do this effectively, you need to have a good understanding of how your data relates to one another, how your objects relate to one another. So I need close date. So I'm going to go and get my close date, and I just click it, and then I hit insert. And because it's a standard field, there's no double underscore C after it. It's just a standard opportunity close date field. And you start to get to know these off by heart when you've been doing it for a while. So like, I know that stage name, that will refer to the opportunity stage. ID will refer to the opportunity ID. But in this instance, I don't need it. So what I need to do now is to calculate the number of days that are left between today's date and the close date. I need to subtract today's date from the close date. Now, bearing in mind, this is not business days. If you want to use business days, then there are formula. Do you know what I do? I go online and I search, calculate number of business days between 2 dates. And there are the formula has actually already been posted for you to copy and paste and adjust as you need it. And I don't know anybody who hasn't done that. Everyone's done that. And Salesforce are really gracious about providing those types of formulae so that you can adjust them for yourself. So this is going to be the number of days between, not business days. So close date, all we do is close date minus, and then because we're only looking at today's date, we just need to put today. So today is written like that, which is a dynamic. Salesforce is really good like that with the dynamic. It's very dynamic with dates. So close date minus today will tell us how many days are remaining to be closed till the opportunity close date. Obviously, check your syntax, and that should be fine. Yep. So when it's set, and bear in mind, when it says here compiled size 30 characters, that's because there are platform limits. When you daisy chain formula fields together, it can increase the number of characters that the system has to compile in one formula. And bearing in mind, it counts all of the characters that are in any other formula fields that are being referenced in one formula field, because you can reference other formula fields. And that's why I call it like a daisy chain. But the system will look at how many characters are in all the formula fields that are being referenced, and it will shout at you if you've not optimized your formula, and you will have to find ways to get it down. In the past, I have had to create a formula field where the API name is 1 _C. 2 _C just so I could get a formula, because it was just over the limit. And so I was having to make savings where I could. Definitely not the best idea. Excuse me, yawning. So then we have our description. Please add a description if you can. Calculates the days between now and the op close date. And then for help text, just say how many days are left. Number of days left. Just to instruct your users in a friendly way. I hit next. This should be familiar to you now, so you decide which profile should see this information. I'm just going to leave it as it is. Hit next. And then it asks me which page layouts do I want my field to appear on. And I hit save. Question from Jeremy, could I go back and look at the formula again? Yes, absolutely. So I've done close date minus today. Okay, let's go and have a look at it front stage. I'm going to go back to my home page and I'm going to refresh, because the changes that I've made in the background need to be picked up on front stage as well. Then I'm going to go and find my opportunities. So I'm going to click my 9 dots there, and I'm going to type in op. Open up the opportunities tab. Now, I've got some overdue opportunities. So let's go and have a look at all of them and see what variations I've got here. Hopefully I've got some that are closing really far in the future, but maybe not. Okay, so all of them are actually past due. So let's look at Get Cloudy, 14th of April. So that means it's about 13 days past due. So let's go to details. And you can see days to close is minus 13. So that's when you could actually have several things ping off at that point. You could have the validation rule that prevents a user from saving the record, or you could have an email, or you could have an email that emails the owner and every single day and says you need to update your opportunity. You need to update your opportunity. You need to update your opportunity until they've updated it, and then it will drop out the queue. So just to prove that this works, so I'm happy with the minus figure. Why don't I make this close tomorrow, 28th? Hopefully my days to close should be 1. Woohoo! There we go. So my days to close on the left-hand side now says 1. So I'm very happy with that formula field. Any questions about that before we go on to the next one? Okay, so that was an example of a formula, a very simple formula field, which only looks at fields on either in the system, like the dynamic date, or on the same object. The next formula field I'm going to show you is a cross-object formula field. And cross-object formula fields are when you take data from another object that's related to the one that you're creating the field for. And in this instance, we are going to use the example of displaying a field from the account on a contact record. So we're going to go backstage again, and we're going to go back to our object manager, and we're going to find contact, C-O-N-T-A-C-T. And we're going to click contact and back down to fields and relationships. Now this one, we're going to actually pull down an account number, which is like a unique reference number for an account, so that we can, if we're phoning a customer and we need to do a quick identity check, we can ask them to confirm their account number, and we can see it directly on the contact page immediately straight away, thus increasing some productivity for the people who are using the system. So into Object Manager, click Fields and Relationships, click New, and we're going to create a formula field. So New. Can anyone guess what type of formula field we are going to create? What's the return type going to be? Text, but you saw. Yes, and the reason it's text is actually it's good practice to have it as text, and I'll tell you why. Not first of all, there's the obvious that many reference numbers are actually a combination of text and numbers, so text field is most appropriate for that, but also that a text field can be defined as an external ID, but also it's more scalable. We heard Steve use that word scalable earlier. When I talk about being scalable, it's thinking about the bigger picture and thinking about what could happen in the future. If you're working with a company that has said that they are on a growth objective, then it's possible that they could acquire some companies in the future. It's possible that they could change their IT systems in the future. And what that means is if we're going to be pulling down account IDs, those account IDs could change. They could change in the future, but there could also be a mismatch between account IDs as they're structured right now and account IDs as they might be structured in the master system for accounts in the future, or they might not match the systems that belong to the company that was acquired, etc. So we have to show some flexibility and show that we've considered that when we're designing our application. So yes, this is going to be a formula field. It's going to return the type of text. And the name of the field is account number. And we're going to scroll down and find text and hit next. Now this one is, you know, if I'm just doing this by myself, I'll just go done. But I'm going to slow that down. And explain what I'm pulling through. So as we did before, we open up the formula editor and we go to insert field. We then need to find, if we keep scrolling down, we're not going to find a field called account number. Why aren't we going to find account number? Because it is a field that lives on the account page. That's correct. It lives under the account and it's on the account object. That's absolutely right. So to go to the account object, we have to pick the right relationship. There could be two relationships to an account object on the contact, just creating that warning for you. So in this instance, we've had to decide, when we look at this relationship, does it mean the account that the contact belongs to, or is it a different kind of relationship to an account, which can happen sometimes. But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to hit account. Then we need to go and get account number. And that basically means is we're bringing down the account number. It's account space number is the name of this formula field. The field we're bringing through is the standard account number field from the account record. And when we found it, we just click insert. And as you can see, our formula looks a bit different now. The first part of the formula says the name of the object, and then there's a dot, and then you have the actual name of the field itself that you're bringing down from the account. Now this is a standard relationship, so you'll notice that there are no like double underscores or anything like that. All we're doing is just showing that data on a field on the contact, and we'll be able to pull that onto different reports, etc. Okay, so go ahead and click next. Your syntax should be fine, and then just apply it to all profiles by clicking next. and then save it and leave it on all the page layouts. Cool, so that's created our field account number, which you'll be able to see now because you've got the _C there, and that tells you roughly what's happening there. So let's go and look front stage. I'm going to go back to my opportunity, and I can see Alan Johnson is on the contact roles. So I'm just going to open up his record, and I should see under the details tab the account number. And as you can see, there's the 117. Now, can anyone spot any difference here? What's different about our account number field versus the other fields that you can see there? That's correct, Samira. You can't edit it. Does anyone know why you can't edit it? Yes, because it's a formula field. Yes, Kat, because it's information pulled in from somewhere else. So how would I get that account number to change? That's correct. You would go to the account record and you would change it there. Now, if I try and edit this record, notice that, again, I can't change it. Because and this is where it's really important as well, because as we start to produce automations further down the line, we need to understand that that account number and that formula result that's being returned is happening in real time. It's showing you that that is exactly the account number that's on the account page. And that becomes important if you ever drive any workflow or automations off of a formula field, because the number is derived, and you want that number to be accurate if it's driving any workflow. And I'll give you an example. Excuse me. I had a timesheeting system, and I created an approval process. We'll be looking at those in the next couple of weeks. And approval processes are a really good way to kind of route records off for approval to different people. And once you switch an approval process on, they just kind of lurk around in the background waiting for a record to be submitted for approval that meets its entry criteria. So I had a solution where on my timesheet record, I had a formula field that returned some text. And in that text, it said different things like, and the name of the field was approval status. So in the approval status field, it would say, what's the name of, sorry, it would say, what should I do with this timesheet right now? So it would say, if it hasn't been submitted for approval yet, then return the word draft. If it's been submitted but not approved yet, you could say it's pending approval. If you wanted to see whether it had been rejected, you could drive some workflow off of that. I will actually show you that, I think, because I thought that was, I really enjoyed doing that. I'm going to show you what I did for that. Why not? I think I have it still. Just don't get too scared. I just want to show you an example of what you can do. So this is my demo org. This is like my playground where I just put all kinds of stuff in here. And I've had this for about, 7 years. It's about 7 years old. So there's all kinds of nonsense in there. Oh, Jeremy, are you okay there? So you didn't see the account number on the contact details sheet. So yeah, just check that you've got it on your page layout, and it will appear in the top section. It's usually the last field on the left in the first section of the page layout. Come on, come on, come on. So I think I have it on the time. Is it? No, it might actually be on the expense report. Let's go and have a look at that. Okay, yeah, if it's visible on the page layout and it's locked, it's because you can't, it's because it's a formula field. So I have a lot of objects in here because I've got a managed package installed, which is which can actually make things a little bit take a little while to load up. So I'll give that a minute to cook. Okay. So, and then we've done our days to close field, which is good. Okay. Oh dear. Okay, so what I tried to do was just shorten that query because it was running off to go and get some information from Salesforce, and there's lots and lots of objects in there. So you see the effect it has on performance. So I have a couple of fields on an object called expense report, which should load momentarily. Come on. I really don't want to have to switch to classic to show you this. I think I'll have to. Come on. Impatient. Okay, don't be too worried about this. This is just what Salesforce used to look like before Lightning came out. And you can see that it doesn't look that different in terms of config. But I do need to find my objects. So it's create objects. And then I need you see how many fields, how many objects it's trying to get to? It's just loads. Because I've got about 3 packages installed here. So we want the expense report. Expense report. And then I've got some formula fields. As you can see, I've done quite a lot of these. So I had, yeah, current approval state. This is the one. Oh my God. Oh dear. So this is how bad it can get. This is just a little formula that I created that shows some text when an expense gets submitted for approval. And all this does is it says and you can see there's a good example of some of the ways that you can use formula fields to automate different processes. So I've got the reason that I created this is because it gives instructions to users as to what they should do next. This was way before we had in-app guidance or anything like that. And you can see that there's a few nested if statements, and also I have added comments into my formula just so that people can see what's on earth's going on, because there's quite a lot. So we have so what this is basically saying is that if the timesheet hasn't been rejected, expense hasn't been rejected, and it's not been submitted for line manager approval, then it's waiting for its first submission. So it returns the words pending submission. And then I could have some kind of automation going on that, or I could use it in a list view, or I could, use it to measure compliance with my business process and say, right, how many people are late with their expense reports, etc., and how long are people taking to do that, to do those expense reports. The next one is, you've got pending decision from line manager. This is another reason to do this, is to see which step of my approval process this record has fallen into based on the criteria that I've put in the approval process. So it just gives a very quick glance, like what on earth's going on with this record. And it's just you can use formula fields to not only guide users, but to help your admins troubleshoot as well. So they can look at this and go, well, if it's hitting this step, this pending decision step, then it means that it's been submitted, but nobody's approved it yet. And you could actually also put in some workflow that keeps emailing that line manager every day to say, you've not approved this expense report yet, and they need their money, for example. So this one's reflects finance approval. So if it's been approved by a line manager, but it hasn't been rejected by finance, then it basically means that record has been sent off to finance to be checked, to make sure all the receipts and the documentation are all there and appropriate. So as you can see, I made this quite a few years ago, but the idea behind it is just to guide people. And then you've got some instructions here, because we had this was inspired by an existing customer who was getting frustrated. Their users were getting frustrated because their finance department were rejecting expenses but not saying why. And we used to give them loads of training around, you know, making sure that they explained why expenses were being rejected. You know, because users didn't really, they were struggling to see that little word rejected. Believe me, you get a lot of princesses in this industry where you have to really spell things out sometimes. So we created this to give them very, very direct instructions based upon where that record fell in terms of the business logic. So this is how interesting formulae can get. So Trailhead, you get it dead easy, but this one was a lot of fun to write, but also a great example of just how much logic you can build into Salesforce, and some of the comment functionality that you can use. Okay, so I'll let you just mull that one over. Let's do another example. So we're going to find distinct objects using the power of one. Now, this is because there's sometimes a need to count the number of unique objects in a report where there are hundreds of records. So if you have 100 opportunities listed in a report, but only a handful of users own these opportunities, how do you find the number of distinct users that are shown in that report? It sounds difficult, but it's a really easy formula. I haven't used it that often. I've used it a couple of times because I found other ways to do it, but I know plenty of people who use this regularly. So we're going to write a custom formula field on the user object. So we're going to go backstage again. We're going to go to Object Manager, and we're going to find the object called user. And we're going to hit that. And we're going to create, under fields and relationships, we are going to create a new field. And it is going to be a formula. And it is going to be a number return type, and it's not going to have any decimal places. Now, this is a really fun trick that you can do, because all we're going to do with this number field is we're going to calculate. We're just going to show the number 1. That's all we're going to do. So for every user that is created, this field will just show a 1. And then what you do is you add it to your report, and then you add it, and it will give you a list, the number of distinct users who own all the opportunities, and you can group it then, can't you? And show how many opportunities are owned by each user. So this formula field is going to be called unique users. Okay, and did I even hit formula? Oh, what a numpty. I told it to do a number field. See, it's easily done. So I went back and I changed it into a formula field. Our return type is number, and I hit next, 1. Something else that I've done before, which I've used for other sort of functionality, where I've hidden the field from users, but it's been used in the background, is like a number that's a date field, which is called today's date. Actually, I shouldn't have done that, but anyway. So check syntax, it should be okay. It's just a number 1. Yep. And I hit next. And I hit next again. Make sure it's available for all my profiles. Add it to all the user profiles and hit save. Easy, easy peasy, like 4 clicks. And all it does is just show the number 1. What did I call it? Unique users. There we go, number 1. So then what I'm going to do is you just go to the reports tab. So you need to go back to front stage here and go to your reports. In fact, did I save that? No, I didn't. La 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 la. Reports. Okie dokie. And I'm going to create, here's my, in fact, you might have this in your playground. I don't know. I'm going to go to my new opportunities report. I'm cheating a little bit. Yeah, because this is an opportunity report. So you see, you can reuse a lot of the reports that you've done. You just remember to save as. So this is showing you 10 new opportunities with a value of 1.5 million. Sorry, a lot more than that, 3.1 million. If I want to know how many unique users are involved in that, I can click edit. And guess what I can do next? Can anyone guess? Yeah, you can. So you can add the unique user column, but what relationship am I pulling that through from? Because, so yes, so the opportunities themselves are actually, they're related to users in several ways. You have last modified by, you have owner, you have created by, and sometimes you might have other ones too that you've created if there are multiple relationships. So in this instance, I mean, you could even be pulling it through the account owner or the contact owner. So you see, you've got your opportunity owner custom info, you've got your account custom info. In fact, I think it just, as standard, it pulls through the opportunity owner. So you want to pull that through and drop it into your report. And as you know, when you look at the opportunity owner itself, yes, so we have 5 opportunities between 2 distinct users. Where does the formula come in? So in our report, what we need to do is summarize that data. However, I think my reports thing has spazzed out on me. So copy of new opportunities. I'm going to save as, and I'm going to call it unique owners opportunities report, because that will refresh the page, because my browser decided to be a pain in the backside then. Couldn't handle it, probably because I'm presenting as well. Come on. Yeah, there we go. So there's our unique users. Now what I can do is I can click where it says in my preview, I can click the little drop down next to unique users, and I can go to summarize and then sum. Yeah. You can make one, yes, Afshan, you can make your own opportunity report and then just pull it through. Samira says the toggle at the top, update preview automatically, should help. Yes. So to see the latest edits, refresh the preview. Now, the reason they've introduced this is because of the amount of, if you've got a lot of results potentially, then it can slow your browser down. So that just enables you to control how much you want to hide, show or hide. Okay, so has it actually? Okay, so to make this easier, I'm gonna. Okay, so I'm grouping and then summarize, sum, and then save and run. And as you can see there, we've got 16 records and only 1 unique user. And that's something that you've been able to do because of that power of 1 concept there. So that's the same as saying count distinct in an Excel spreadsheet if you're given a list of data. So that means you can run workflow off. No, you can't. but it just gives you an easier way to kind of see that information. So that's what we've done. That's an old screenshot there. Okay, so obviously you're going to get some errors when you create formula fields, and the check syntax button is a really helpful, it helps me all the time, helpful way to debug your formulas. But also for me, I used to see it almost as like a game. Like if I could get my formula to go green the first time, I was like, yes, you know. But also if you've been really battling your way through writing a formula, there's been times when I've written a formula and it's just not making sense at all, and I've been at it for 2 hours. So I copy and paste my formula into a notes field, that I save on my computer, and I go for a walk for an hour, and I come back and I look at it again and I go, well, you're just missing a bracket there, you silly numpty. It can help to do that. Having a second pair of eyes really helps as well. So common errors: missing parentheses or brackets, if you like. So if you don't, so remember that massive formula field with all of the brackets, closing brackets at the end? I had to go through that painstakingly and keep making sure that every single if statement was closed appropriately at the end. And that's why you know, creating laying out your formula in a really simple way. We go to history. Very full history. That's why laying out your formula fields in a really easy to read way is really important, especially because, you know, like certainly situations like we have here with this big nasty formula field. Notice how I've laid it out. For every opening statement, I have opened the bracket and then I've gone to a new line, then I've opened that bracket and then I've gone to a new line, and then I've made sure that every bracket, every parenthesis is matching. So I know, looking at this, that here I've closed the not, and here I've closed the is pick val. And then when it comes to the and, this is where I've closed the and statement, because my and statement covers these 2 lines. The if statement is still open, and it should be, because I've said if it's not this and it's not that, then show pending submission. Else, if it's this, then do this. If not, then if it's this, then do this. If not, then if it's this, then do this. If not, then if it's this and do not this. And as you can see, this is all my if statements being closed off at the end. Why did I close the ifs? Yeah, okay, you got it. Yeah. So it's the else's. This, if you consider, if you're familiar with Excel formulas and so on, you might notice some parallels, but they're not quite the same. How about using tabs to trace the code? You can, if you want to. It's completely up to you. I mean, I've opened up formula fields where it's just continuous text. There are some browser add-ons that you can get that help you to use spaces and so on. You can use tabs if you want. I think what you mean there is being able to differentiate, like you would on a piece of, like you would if you were looking at code anyway. You might decide to indent rather than tab. So, but as you can see, if I hit the tab button, it takes me straight to that button there, syntax. So it's just personal preference. I prefer not to do that, because otherwise I've got to add spaces like that, and I just don't want to do that. Samira, when it comes to best practices, is it better to nest conditions instead of using operators in between conditions? It's completely up to you. There are, you can use operators if you prefer to. This, for me, I've had nothing but problems. If I've done or statements, as you'll notice that in the operators, you've got all these different symbols. Every time I've tried to do that, I've had issues. So I've got myself into a habit of using words rather than operators. Like I say, it's very flexible. If you want to use operators, by all means, please do. Plenty of people do. It's just, for me, I find it easier to read when it's written out like this. Okay, so common errors, missing brackets. Sometimes actually you'll get this error, syntax error, missing bracket, if you're missing not a bracket, but a comma. Sometimes if you're missing a comma, you'll get that error. So if I just try by taking away that comma in the first line, it's probably going to have a go at me. There you go, missing bracket. And it's not a missing bracket, it's a missing comma. So just something to be aware of. Yeah, rude, I know. It's leading me down the garden path. So so there are a few things to watch out for, because some of these errors are not, they're a bit deceptive. Oh, it does actually say that. I haven't even read that far ahead. I just, oh my God. Okay. If you're certain your brackets are correct, check your commas. If you have done an incorrect parameter type, so if you give a function a number and it expects text, it will tell you off. So sometimes, so if you put len is a text function because you're looking at the length of a text field. And then if you put numbers in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's not going to see that as text. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to turn that len into a text field yourself in order to do that. So you would just do, and the same for pick list values as well. So for pick list values, I wonder if it's going to explain that a little later on. But let's say I do formula returns a number. And then if I do len 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it will have a go at me. It will say, there you go, it will say incorrect parameter type for function len, expected text received number. So what you have to do there is go text and then close your bracket there. Let's have a look. Boom. There we go. One character, completely green. Smashed it. Because that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So len is a text function. You got to turn it into text. The same for a pick list value. So if you're working with pick list values, so if you go to an opportunity and you go to stage name, and then put it in as like text here, stage name needs analysis, it's going to have a go at you when you check the syntax, because it's going to say pick lists are have special functions. So you'll have to do the same for that. What I like to do, there's two options. You can either do text, stage name, needs analysis. Text, or you can do what I've done on the nasty formula, which is pick val. I tend to favor this approach, but it's completely up to you. It's whatever you feel most comfortable with. My experience, I get into habits. We all get into habits. So I use is pick val, but you could also change it and say text brackets status equals rejected. If you wanted to work exactly, it should work the same way. But for me, this is just my preference. Also for not, you could just use operators there and say if this not is not that, and then a double ampersand for and, you know, then you could do it that way. If you're concatenating, if you want to concatenate some information together, then you could do what I've done a lot is kind of like a first name and single ampersand is how you concatenate. And then I've done like this and last name. Because if you just concatenate first and last name, you won't get your, you will not get your space in between. And if you're looking at, if, let's say you're doing a cross-object formula, you need to go and get the first name and last name for a contact that via a relationship that your object's got with that contact or that user, then that's how you'll have to structure that. Let me just look. Is there any other weird ones? Incorrect number of parameters for functions. So if you input too many or too few, it will have a go at you. So if it's expecting, so this one is ABS. I've not used that one before, actually. ABS. Another tip you can have, actually, is if you click on one of these functions and insert it, you should see an explanation of what that function does. So this returns an absolute value of a number without its sign. So if you put absolute is -18 with a 2, it's going to have a go because it wants this format here. So just a tip, if you're not sure how to structure your, because it's not quite like Excel and it's not quite like typical coding, then you can use those. You can just click on the function name and it will give you some advice on how to do that. Today, that's how you use today. You can use a weekday. You can use ceiling and floor. You can use round, so you can round numbers up. Some of the ones that I use the most often are if statements. I use max sometimes. I use or quite regularly. And that just explains what your syntax should look like when you create these. Case I use quite a lot as well. Case I use with pick lists quite a lot. And some of the case things I've done is if I say stage name, so case, this is if I want to, let's say I wanted to show what stage, if I've got on my opportunity stages and I want to say whether it's stage 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, I would use a case statement to do that. And the way I'd structure that is just say case and then put the name of the field, stage name, and then I put in qualification, comma, I could then put stage 1. But then after that, in a typical if statement, you would then go else if stage name is qualification, then this, and on it goes. So, but what I like to do with cases is actually make it easier to read in this way. So I then copy and paste. In fact, I've been known to open this up in Excel and concatenate various stuff together just to create the formula, especially if it's long, and then I just copy and paste it all into the box. Because sometimes it's easier to just concatenate cells together. I've had cells with like loads of inverted commas in and brackets in, and I've just joined it all together in one and then copied and pasted it in here. So qualification, needs analysis might be stage 3. So you see what you're doing here, and then you finish off with that. So basically what you're saying is if stage name, if in the case that stage name is qualification, then show that. If it's the case that the stage name is needs analysis, then show that. If it's not, show nothing. That's all that that is all this this expression is saying at the moment. And I often get the missing parameter error if I forget to put this on. So that formula, I know from experience looking at that formula that it's wrong because I haven't actually said what's going to happen if it's not the case at all. You could use, yes, I could have used case instead of if on my intense example. I did try, and I got myself all mixed up in a tizzy because I had other logic to put in there. If it's not this and it's that, then do this. I was checking other fields, and then I had automations ticking those boxes as we go. So in effect, the automations and the formulas work together to produce the solution. So yes, there's lots of ways you can do it. There's just because somebody's like, there's often I'll go into an org and I'll be like, well, I wouldn't write it like that, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. As long as it's delivering the result that's needed and it's scalable, then I've got no issues. Formula result is incompatible with formula return type, so we saw that earlier. So if expecting date, then that's where you need to check your formula return type. Field doesn't exist, obviously, if the object doesn't support it, or it's a field that, or you've just put the name in wrong. Like you see people trying to get clever, putting API names in based on their own knowledge, and sometimes, you know, that can go wrong. So that's why I like to use the insert button, because then I know I've done it. I'm the kind of girl that will open up Excel and use the formula builder, because I just don't want to risk it unless it's a VLOOKUP. I'm okay with those, but it's purely so because it helps me. I'm a very visual thinker, so having it presented in that visual way to me really helps me. Field hello does not exist, so if you forget to put quotation marks around a text, literal or a hyperlink, and then just, you know, does Salesforce actually do that? So if you go and type in fake function, you're not going to get anything back. So we're just about done for now. We'll pick up with the rest of this and do the challenge on Wednesday. If you want to have a look at some further examples, please feel free. There are some good examples there. In fact, I'll probably get you to build them on Wednesday, and then we'll go through and do the challenge. Does anybody have any questions before we close for the day? Okay, I assume you're all experts now. Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. I really appreciate your time, and take care, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you, everybody.